This episode contains conversations about personal traumas that may be difficult for some listeners. I invite you to take good care of yourself, and if you need extra resources of support, head over to drscottlyons.com. I'm Dr. Scott Lyons, and you're watching or listening to The Gently Used Human. Trauma is a universal experience that touches all of our lives in one way or another. Whether it's the shattering impact of violence or loss, the insidious effects of systemic oppression, or the lingering echoes of childhood adversity, trauma has the power to shape our lives in profound and often invisible ways. But what if the key to healing trauma lies not in our minds, but in our bodies? What if the path to recovery is rooted in the very essence of our embodied existence? Today, I'm honored to be joined by my friend, my colleague, my mentor, Dr. Peter Levine, the pioneer of Somatic Experiencing, a revolutionary approach to trauma healing. Known as the father of trauma therapy, Dr. Levine has dedicated his life work to understanding the intricate dance between our minds, bodies, and the traumatic experience that can become lodged within us. In this conversation, we'll explore the evolution of our understanding of trauma over the past 4 decades, challenging the notion that it's merely just a brain disorder. Dr. Levine will shed light on how trauma becomes encoded in the very fibers of our being, and how addressing it on a somatic level is crucial for trauma healing and resolution. We'll delve into the power of embodiment, the importance of feeling safe in our bodies, and the gradual process of reconnecting with traumatic sensations. Dr. Levine will share his personal journey of healing, emphasizing the significance of being seen and held in relationships, and the transformative act of sharing one's trauma narrative. Join us as we venture into the depths of the human experience, uncovering the profound wisdom of our bodies and the resilience that lies within us all. Whether you're a survivor seeking healing, a practitioner in the field, or simply someone who wishes to deepen their understanding of trauma, this conversation promises to be a powerful and enlightening exploration of the path to wholeness. Let's get it going. Dr. Peter Levine, welcome to The Gently Used Human. I don't even know where to start. You have my heart. That's all I know how to say. I think I remember being 20 years old and picking up your book in a therapist office and going, oh, I think this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Wow.
And flash forward a good chunk of years later, to be in conversation with you, to talk with you, to get to spend time with you as a friend and a mentor, I just want to say my heart is full.
Oh,
and
that's very
welcome
sweet.
to the show.
Okay. All right.
Peter, you're kind of known as the father of trauma therapy, and I want to dive into that today. Of like, it's trauma therapy has been something that has evolved, and in good part because of you. And I want to kind of start with like, what is trauma, and then to talk about the evolution of it in the last 40, 50 years.
Okay. So what is trauma? Okay. Well, when I beginning to develop my work in the late 60s and early 70s, I was fortunate to not have known what the definition of trauma was, which is something more like it's a brain disorder or even a brain disease that can only be at best managed with medications and with helping people change their negative thoughts. And so it became clear to me pretty early that trauma was something that happens, that gets stuck in the body. And it's to the body that we need to address to come out of this stuckness and go from trauma to awakening and then to flow again.
When you were discovering that, were there other people kind of aligned, or was there like pushback?
Well, if you can believe it or not, there was nothing at that time. When the book came out, Waking the Tiger came out, I think it was finally published in 1996. There was, again, if you can believe it, that there was only one other book on trauma, and that was Judith Herman's excellent book, on trauma.
Yeah.
But that
Yeah.
was it. That was it.
Yeah.
And then if you go on Amazon or Google or something like that, there are literally hundreds of books
Yeah.
about trauma.
Thousands.
Yeah,
Now.
yeah, yeah, probably so. Probably so. So, anyhow, let me give you like a simple example. Let's
Yeah.
just say as a child, I was hit a lot, either
Mm.
physically or emotionally. And so,
Yeah.
what the child is likely to do is to brace against being hit again. And you
Mm.
can see that in my shoulders.
Yeah.
Now, the first time it happens, I maybe just let my shoulders come back down,
Mm.
maybe even the second time. But by the third or fourth time, the shoulders start to stay up there. They don't
Mm.
go down. And so they're telling the brain
Yeah.
that you're under threat.
Mm.
And until that changes in the body, and there's specific ways that that needs to happen, but
Yeah.
until that can happen, then we are uh, constantly on guard, scanning for being hit again. Of
Mm.
course, there are thoughts about it, but it's
Yeah.
primarily the basic information is coming from our bodies, coming from, in
Yeah.
this case, our shoulders.
Yeah. Would we say to people, like, as the shoulders are stuck up and there's a on guard position in the body, that it's constantly telling the body to be prepared, but it's also saying at the same time, like, we are still under threat?
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
It just, in other words, and it's not just about one specific thing because it
Yeah.
becomes generalized. So we're
Mm.
expecting the whole world to be dangerous. And that,
Mm.
again, that generalizes and may
Yeah.
take a while, but then it eventually does happen.
Yeah.
And, and again, it's not, you can't just tell the person, well, relax your shoulders.
No.
Well, you can't do that, you
Mm.
know. And in somatic experiencing, what we have learned, what we discover, is that to bring the person's awareness to their shoulders, and then just maybe to introduce it to them by saying something like, well, if they'll experience tension, likely even pain, and say,
Yeah.
okay, if you feel the tension, maybe that's even underneath that pain. And if that tension were to increase, what might happen to your shoulders? So usually pretty quickly a person says, well, they go up like that. And
Yeah.
then I would say, okay, but now that do that slow, slow, slow motion and just a little bit, very slowly, but with awareness. And that's the
Yeah.
key. It's also because this is activating an involuntary part of the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, through the
Mm.
gamma efferent system. So I very slowly let my shoulder, even rather than lift them, I let my shoulders rise just the smallest amount more
Mm.
and then let them release. And then just wait there and just wait for something to happen, and something will happen. And
Mm.
after that, the person might feel tingling, they might feel vibration, they might feel temperature change. The images might come up, memories might come
Yeah.
up. And then I'll have the person do it again. Okay, so let's do it again together this time. Just slowly increasing the tension, letting it go up a little bit more this time, another eighth of an inch,
Mm.
and then releasing, and then again feeling the different sensations and feelings and thoughts. Because these are the very sensations that can take us out of the trauma and bring us back to the here and now.
Mm. So when all that tingling or the memories are emerging or coming up, would we say that's the trauma releasing, or that's part of the things that never got to be metabolized and processed, like being allowed to have space,
Both.
or all of that? Both of
Yeah.
that.
Oh, absolutely. Because again, it's, and some of the things that if I were the therapist that I might be
Yeah.
observing is they might not be aware of the sensations. Because
Yeah.
again, these are the sensations that can take them out of the stuckness.
Yeah.
So I might just notice that they take an easy breath. And
Mm.
then I might, in that case, say something, that's it. Just let that happen. Just feel that breath. And so again, it brings it into the realm of awareness.
Mm.
And what the thing about trauma is the
Yeah.
very sensations that will take us out of trauma, we become frightened of them. It's like
Mm.
any change is experienced as threat. Even if it's a positive change, even if it's more of a relaxation, it's experienced as threat. So you have to work again with that aspect of it and the perception that it's going to be stress.
Yeah.
So again, just introducing, because most people, especially
Yeah.
traumatized people, are really fundamentally disconnected from our bodies. I mean, as a society, we're
Yeah.
disconnected from our bodies. But then, as we learn to connect with our bodies, then we also are connecting with these healing forces, that these movements towards uh, letting go, coming to wholeness.
Yeah.
And but again, the very sensations that will take us in that direction, we experience them as being threatened.
Yeah.
So what happens is when people are first experiencing something that's happened, a traumatic event or a traumatic sensation,
Yeah.
it feels worse because, in part, because there's a contraction of the body.
Mm.
But with every contraction, if we help the person follow it through, then that contraction will lead to an expansion, and then to another contraction, and then to a greater expansion, and again and again. So it's moving back and forth between contraction and expansion, which is one of the main things that helps people come through the trauma, out of the trauma, and
Yeah.
back into the present time, into the here and now.
And like trauma then in this way is where that expansion and contraction, that pulse of life is stuck. It's stagnant.
Yes. Yep. I
Mm.
couldn't have said it better myself.
I
And
think I've actually just quoted you. So you have said
oh,
it.
I know. Talk about that was a funny thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes people send a book they,
Yeah.
want me to look at or write something
Yeah.
about. And I was thumbing through this one book and I noticed this quote and I
Yeah.
thought, oh, that is really cool. I have to write it down. And then I realized, wait a minute, it was a quote from In an Unspoken Voice.
That's a quote
And
from
that
you,
is,
of course.
yes, exactly. And trauma is not just what happens or so much what happens to us, but
Yeah.
it's rather what we hold inside in the absence of that witness, of that empathetic, caring, present witness, empathetic
Mm.
witness. And we need that.
Yeah.
For all the work that I've done in working with literally thousands of people over the past
Yeah.
50 years,
Yeah.
when a traumatic event or a potentially traumatic event happened to me, I knew all the tools, but I also needed somebody to be there, to be present, to be with me.
Yeah.
And I think that's an important thing because so many of us haven't received that as children, even as babies.
Yeah.
And it's so important in feeling that we have a body.
Yeah.
When the baby is first born, a typical thing it does is it sticks its tongue out. And then if the parent or the caregiver sticks their tongue out, you could see
Yeah.
something sparks in the baby, and the baby does
Yeah.
it again, and then we reflect that again.
Yeah.
The caregiver reflects that again, and they're in this dance of excitement, and that
Mm.
excitement is the beginning of an embodied sense of self, of a body self, if you
Mm.
wish.
Yeah. So that mirroring, that holding, that empathetic presence allows them to not only be seen, but start to have the safety to build that sense of self.
Exactly, exactly, and the
Mm.
self, first and
Beautiful.
foremost, comes from the body and is a
Yeah.
body self.
Yeah. I think that's such a radical. It's funny we have to say it's a radical shift or a radical thought because it's and when we say like Descartes really poisoned the well by saying I think therefore I am, when we know it's I feel therefore I am, and it's
Yeah,
our
I
feelings
sense,
that I
feel,
sense, yeah,
I
I
sense.
move,
It starts there. I
yeah,
move. Actually,
I
that is
move,
probably what happens first. I move.
yeah,
I
yeah,
sense. I feel,
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
images, I think,
Yeah.
and therefore I am. Yeah,
Yeah.
he mucked up the water for sure. A contemporary of his, Blaise Pascal, he wrote him a
Yeah.
letter basically and said
Yeah.
to Monsieur Darcot, I cannot forgive you for this screw up that you. He didn't use the word screw up, but
But he
basically is
should
what he
have.
screw up or F up. And
Yeah.
he said, the body has its reasons which reason cannot reason. Or originally he said the heart has its reasons which reason
Yeah.
cannot reason. He got it.
Yeah.
And somehow we got relegated to the backwaters, and Descartes became the basic teacher of dysfunction for the next
Yeah.
several hundred years.
It's amazing, Peter, just how like one philosophical perspective can dissociate a culture for so many hundreds of years.
Yeah. Now, I don't want to
It's
blame
wild,
everything on Monsieur Descartes, but he
but it
really
would
had
be
a,
fun.
yeah, right. He can't talk.
Yeah. I want to take a moment to give a loud shout out to the Embodied Lab, which is one of the most incredible resources for body-based and somatic therapies. This show is all about healing, and the Embodied Lab does exactly that. Whether you're on your own journey of transformation and discovery, or enhancing your skill sets in your career as like a coach or a therapist, a body worker, or really any career where you are supporting other gently used humans, the Embodied Lab is your place for deep, inspiring, and impactful workshops, certificates, masterclasses, and an incredible community of like-minded folks. I love the Embodied Lab, and so do so many other people that call it a platform to come home to over and over again. The Embodied Lab is giving my listeners an exclusive offer, a one-time 10% off code to enhance your embodied well-being. All you have to do is go to theembodiedlab.com and use the code GentlyUse10 at checkout.
When I tried to trace this down historically,
Yeah.
what I've come up with, and this is looking at pictures and drawings and written books from that time, kind of in the late Egyptian, early Greek time, I think there was a time of embodiment, that people were more embodied than they are now. And it's been going downhill ever since. But I think it's now that arc has changed and it's starting to move back into awareness. I mean, I actually love the name of your organization, the Embodied Lab, because this is a lab to discover or rediscover embodiment, the inner meaning of embodiment. So, it's kind of interesting. It's okay if I brag a little bit.
Please.
The fourth Lifetime Achievement Award I received was psychotherapy.net. Psychotherapy.net. And that's, pretty traditional therapy organization. But in their magazine, the month where I received the award, those puzzles that have 1,000 pictures and you first try to find the corners and then the edges. Well, there was a picture like that on the front, on the cover. And the text was, and there was one piece missing, one of those little pieces missing. And it said then, what did they say? The missing piece is the body. I think it's now being recognized, especially, after 2000 and 2020 now. It's sort of slowly becoming mainstream. Well, at least it's not fringe anymore.
It's not fringe,
Yeah, and research on interoception. If you can feel your heartbeat with your awareness, people who can do that, very simple academic research, then these people are in many ways healthier, emotionally and physically. It's really astonishing. But that's just about the heartbeat. Literally,
Yeah.
there are hundreds, thousands of different nuanced body sensations that are going on in us all the time and make
Yeah.
all the difference in the world. But again, you
Yeah.
can see how the research is again saying, wait a minute, we have to take another look at this whole, at the body, the missing piece.
The missing piece. It's so funny because it wasn't missing and then it was. And I think
Uh,
that's the interesting historical piece of for those of us who do somatics. And I've said this to you before, Peter. It's like I don't I think I imagine people see you and see the work you've done, but I don't know if they take in the amount of struggle it took to bring it out of the fringe, to find that missing body piece.
yeah, and this is actually because now I look at my life, I'm at the
Yeah.
age where I
Yeah.
clearly have less years to live in the future, even if they're really good years, than I
Yeah.
have in the past.
Mm.
So I thought this is time to do it, to take a reckoning, to really look at my life of the
Mm.
different events, some horrific, some beatific, that have happened to me,
Yeah.
and kind of put them together in a coherent flow, a coherent narrative eventually.
Mm.
And so I started writing what later then became my autobiography of trauma, but it was only
Yeah.
meant to be for myself. It was an excavation and looking
Mm.
through my life and seeing where I started, where I am,
Yeah.
and maybe even where I'm going. And so I talk about, if in the book, one of the sections is called The Three Most Important Women in My Life, and
Yeah.
also the three most important men in my life.
Yeah.
And the four most important women have really been taking me into my body in a way. My
Mm.
first exposure was to a woman named Charlotte Selvers,
Mm-hmm.
and she had developed an approach called, what did she call it? Sensory awareness, or sensory awakening, sensory awareness. I'm not sure. And when I met her, I didn't know I had a body. I didn't know what a body was, except, it's
Yeah.
something you have to feed once in a while. And uh,
And put it to sleep once in a while.
yeah. But anyhow, I was able to take this class that she was giving for a group of Zen monks from Green Gulch Meditation Center. And my friend Jack was able to get me in. He was part of that group. So I went there, and after the first hour, I'm asking her, why in the world did I go here? I waste my time. Because she was
Yeah.
having us hold the stone in our hands and feel
Yeah.
the temperature, feel the texture, feel the weight, and what? Who cares? Oh, and I remember passing one of the monks. We had a momentary eye contact, and I said, "How is this for you?" And he said, "Whoa, big headache." So,
It's a lot of just to normalize it, like it's a lot of work for those of us. I've said to you before too, like I referred to myself as a kid to my parents as a walking ghost. Like
ah,
that was my
mhm,
nickname for myself essentially. And it's interesting of like it's a headache to try to do and be in the body from the head.
right, right,
And that's
yeah,
how all we know how to do it at first for most of us.
yeah.
So what happened
Anyhow,
next?
okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, she has us
Yeah.
laying down on the ground, and she has us feel our breath coming in from our feet, and
Mm.
then going out to our feet. And I remember thinking, that is the stupidest thing I've heard. Anybody knows the feet can't breathe. They may smell, but they can't breathe. But when at the end of the day, this was at this beautiful church on O'Farrell Street in San Francisco. We went out the door and just looked down in the valley and then out to the Bay Bridge. And it was the most beautiful sight I had ever seen.
Mm.
So I realized that something happened. And that
Mm.
was the beginning of my study of embodiment, not of working with trauma per se, but really
Yeah.
of understanding the nature of embodiment and how that really changes our whole perception of the world.
I think that's a really helpful marker Because if for some of us who are new to somatics or body-oriented awareness, and we assume we should feel something right away, I think it's really beautiful to say, hey, sometimes the markers of change are actually perceived in our environment or perceived in a relationship and not first in ourselves, because that hasn't been the safest place to experience anything.
Exactly. The body has become the source of danger, of threat.
Yeah.
So of course, we
Yeah.
don't want to feel it, to connect with it. But the
Yeah.
key, or a key here, is in doing it slowly, doing it gradually, a little bit at a time, a little bit at a time. I call that titration. We just touch into the traumatic sensations and then come back to the here and now. And well, actually, the book that I just published called An Autobiography of Trauma, A Healing Journey, I talk about the beginning of how I got to develop somatic experiencing out of my own wounding. There's a Greek archetype called Chiron, which to me means the wounded healer. And we have to meet our own wounds. And a trauma, the word is wound. It's the same root. And we have to be able to do that in a gentle way, in a kind way. And that, again, may take a little doing, and that may come slowly, depending on all of the adverse events that might have been happening to us throughout our lifetime. And so I was experiencing some disturbing symptoms, some disturbing sensations, feelings, and some momentary images. And I realized I had to take a dose of my own medicine. So I asked one of my students to just sit with me, to be with me, to guide me in this exploration. In somatic experiencing, we never go into the person's trauma. Yeah. I mean, but there are methods that basically do that. So-called prolonged exposure, where you have the person relive their trauma over and over and over again. And I think that can be destructive.
Yeah.
But anyhow, so when I was guided by my student, and an image came up, a sensation, and then an image came up of when I was 4 or 5 years old. And I had, on my 4th or 5th birthday, my parents snuck into my room in the middle of the night, and they laid train tracks underneath my bed, down into the room, then back, and then again, forming a circle and oval. And when I woke up, I saw I heard the train, I saw the train, and my body just came to life, the opposite of trauma. So that's why it's already important. Yeah. And I just literally, I jumped out of bed. I ran over to the transformer so I could control the speed and make the horn go woo woo. And in that moment, although I didn't have the words for it, and even though some horrible things had happened before that also, but especially after that, I knew that I was cared for, that somebody, if only once, cared about me and showed me kindness and love. And that's what I got out of that memory. And then that was allowing me to go and excavate some of that traumatic material that was associated with those symptoms. And it's a long story. I talk about some of it or actually talk about a fair amount of it in the autobiography of trauma. My family was under threat from the mafia. It's a long story. His life was threatened by Johnny Diaguardo, called Johnny Dio, and he was like the Al Capone. He was worse than the Al Capone of New York. And he was featured in 2 movies, Goodfellas and The Irishman. So if you really wanted a bloody, violent murder to happen, he's the person you would go to. So my father was told, my father and my mother was told, if you testify against us, you'll find your body face down in the East River. So this guy made He made his threats and he carried out his threats.
Wow.
Well, again, we didn't know what was happening because it was never
Yeah.
talked about. And this is another important thing. The milieu is sometimes as important as the trauma itself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing that it needs to, therapists and all of us need to understand even more. It's not just the events, but it's
Yeah.
rather how we were held, how
Yeah.
we attached, how we bonded,
Yeah.
how we attached. All of these things are at least equally important. And what I remember about that, what came up in the session that I did with well, first of all, when I would come home from school, I would run up, have my milk and Pepperidge Farms cookies, and then run back down and then go across the road, go over this wrought iron fence and down through the bushes to a running track below, also an oval, cinder block oval. And I would run and I would start to feel power in my legs. And this really helped me have an alternative experience from the legs being pulled out from under me because of the mafia threat. As I say, it was never talked about, but we knew something was really wrong.
Yeah.
So anyhow, on one of those days, I climbed the fence and started going to the bushes. And I saw a bunch of thugs. They were probably from the mafia. They were smoking cigarettes and they had these motorcycle hats. And I knew something was wrong. I could really sense it. So I decided I would best just continue going down. If I can get through the bushes, then I could maybe escape from this.
Yeah.
But I was grabbed from behind. I was knocked down. I was brutally hit. I was knocked virtually unconscious.
Yeah.
And was raped. And I'm pretty sure, as I kind of go back over that from the book, I think I realized that they were probably doing that so that I would tell my parents what happened, so they would know how big the threat was. But I didn't tell them. I hid it from them. And I also hid it from myself.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, with the help of my guide, my student, that I was able to work through that, but also feel the importance of being seen, of being held. Because again, that was the thing that wasn't happening. That was the milieu that that really caused the weakness in that fabric, not just the trauma. I mean, the trauma was pretty severe, but the other was just as important.
Yeah. That's so much to hold for a child, for any human, Peter. And I mean, when I first read that, in your book, I couldn't help but cry. It was for that, my friend and that small child who couldn't hold all of that until he was an adult to have the space again to allow it to be seen and heard.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That child couldn't know any of this, couldn't understand that it wasn't his fault. Because children do that. They blame themselves. I'm not sure why that is. I think in part, at least, it's if they blame themselves. If they were causative of this, at least they'd have some small amount of agency.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the reasons it comes up. But, to let that child and to cry for that child was so important to me. At the very last chapter of the book, the chapter called Living My Dying.
Yeah.
And in that chapter, I really feel through all of these valleys and mountains and circuitous routes that I came back to that part of myself which was always alive, which was always joyful, which was filled with curiosity and passion for life. I'm going to show you that picture if you don't mind. I think I can how to get to it. Here we go. So, I'm not sure you can see this, but That's
Oh,
the beloved child.
how
And
old were you there?
I think about 18 months.
Oh, that smile.
And that was the return
Yeah.
from the trauma, from the abuse to that child, and taking that child in my hand and leading the child, and the child leading me.
Hmm.
And then that really kind of opened things up for living my dying.
Wow. It's such a remarkable title for the sense that it's also living your dying, the process of the aliveness going out and the
Yeah.
aliveness coming back. And
Mm.
I mean,
Mm.
I can't help but also call back what you said a few minutes ago about like this is the latter part of your life too.
Yes, yes, that's right.
And
It's the later and the earliest, the later and the youngest.
This show is also brought to you by the absolutely stunning and powerful tools of transformation that are created by Omala. Oof, even the name Omala transports you to a place of flow and vitality. These are some of my favorite products ever. They have an amazing color-changing yoga mat that responds to your temperature and presence and reflects back your posture in real time. There's this incredible smelling skin balm candle that heats up to activate all the essential oils and vitamins that your skin has been craving. I mean, look, if I could live in a giant bath of this candle, I would 100% do it. They also have these journals that lead you into profound insight, and then you get to plant those journals to create a stunning flower garden. What? I mean, if that's not deep and inventive, I don't know what is. If you're someone who desires to live a luxurious flow of life and who believes in transformative wellness, then you have to check out Omala. Omala is giving my listeners an exclusive discount to treat yourself to something that is as special as you, boo. All you have to do is go to omala.com, that's OMALA.com, and use the code DrScott10 at checkout. And a portion of every purchase goes to an incredible charity. You got this. You talked about that memory, that experience in San Francisco about like going out after the class and seeing the bridge and as one of the most beautiful things you'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, after the book's out, you allowed us to also be part of the journey of your alivening. What's changed for you?
When I started teaching somatic experiencing, it was a group to about 12 or 15 Berkeley therapists. They would come out every other week to they called it my Wildcat Canyon treehouse.
Uh-huh.
I would do a demonstration with somebody and try to explain what I was doing so that I could teach it.
Yeah.
And when I realized that for some reason I had been gifted with this knowledge, that it was my duty to really bring it out into the world. Mm. And so I did. There's the story of Johnny Appleseed. I don't know if you know the story, but this is an early American story with this young man. He plants apple seeds from coast to coast in the U.S. and to grow all of these apple trees. So I realized that I was going to plant this wherever I could. Anybody who would listen, anybody who would take me seriously. And I did that. And I did that for months and some years. But now when I look, not back, but when I look forward, I see this is now being taught by, I think, 50 or 60 trainers in 44 countries. And so this burden is no longer on my shoulders because it's shared by all these others. So I feel tremendous relief from that. And in the book, I asked myself 2 questions. Have I done enough? And then the answer is affirmative, because again, I don't have to carry this burden myself. It's not even a burden really, but it's being brought out into the world by these 50 or so trainers. But there was a second question, and that is, am I enough? And writing this autobiography, initially just as an exploration, as an excavation, it helped me live into the next question, which was, am I enough? And I consider that to be, in a way, a work in progress.
Yeah.
That so many things have influenced me during my lifetime. So many, again, both beatific and horrific, awe and awful.
Yeah.
I knew that, again, this is something that really could help. Well, writing the book, when my friend, my colleague, said, suggested I write it as a book, I said, no way, I'm not going to do that. It's too no, it's violent, but it's too revealing. It's too exposing.
Yeah.
And she said, well, I really think you could do this in a way that it helps people when they read it, and help them with their own healing journey, and help them move forward in their lives, and even write their own stories. So I just let it go. And she said, well, Peter, think on it. Well, a lot of times when I don't know what my next step is, or I feel somehow stuck, or just I don't have all the knowledge that I need, then I often get a dream that is revelatory, that really lets my unconscious talk, because my conscious mind couldn't figure this out. And so in the following dream, I'm facing this open field, and I have in my hands a whole ream of manuscript papers. And I could see something's typed on it, so it is some kind of a manuscript. But I don't know what I'm supposed to do with it. So I look to the left, I look to the right, left, right. Again, I'm stuck, I'm conflicted. I don't know what to do. I don't know what my next step would be. Then in all of this equivocation, in not knowing, all of a sudden, a strong breeze came from behind me and took all of these pages and flew them up into the air to land where they might land. And when I awoke, that's when I knew that I was supposed to write the autobiography of trauma. And a friend of mine once said something like this, Peter, it must feel good to be able to help people while you're in your sleep. And so in a way, that was sort of the idea I had in releasing the book. And believe me, it wasn't a straight line. Sometimes I just felt I couldn't possibly do it. And, what will people think? How will people judge me? Will it be too much? And so, I just continued to live with that. And then as I started getting some feedback, I realized that was the right decision.
That's such a big question. I think, first of all, thank you for sharing that. I can only imagine what it is to spend so many decades becoming and being this facilitator, this teacher, this holder of what we now really know as somatic trauma therapy or trauma therapy. And then to have this pause to reveal so much about yourself.
Yeah.
That's so big.
Believe me, that was not an easy decision. I mean, the first decision was made from the dream, but I went back and forth. The first time I talked about this in a large audience was in December. There was this evolution of psychotherapy conference, and there's several thousand people, usually between 4,000 and 8,000 people. So here's this room filled with people, and I opened my mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. And I was mortified. I just looked around, and I was a little bit in a dissociative state.
Fair enough.
But then I remembered what some of my friends, my colleagues, other people have written about the book. And I
Mm,
really felt them being with me, being
mm,
by my side, having my back, that they were
mm,
there and they were there supporting me. And I think the fact that I, in many instances, didn't get that support as a child, so it was not something that came intuitively easily to me. But again,
yeah.
really feeling that their support, that allowed the words to come out. And since that time, each time I do a talk or give some kind of an interview,
Yeah.
I feel more settled, you know.
Mm.
And the fact that it's now out, and by the way, now it's definitely the point of no return. You know,
It's been
people
published,
can
yeah.
copy, yeah, that's it. There's no way. Um, and and I'm glad for that. I'm
Mm,
glad for that. And I don't know, but I imagine that some people will put it down. I don't, for whatever reason, probably because of their
mm,
own stuff. But I just don't know. But again, I put it out there to land where it may, and that's not my choice anymore. It's not my decision. It's there, and
mm.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for all the support I've had from people alive and real, and those that were even imaginary.
Mm, mm. Well, I, I mean, congratulations, Peter. It's so significant. It's monumental, and it's brilliant too. And I really I think it opens the door, a possibility for a lot of people to say, if they want, what is their autobiography of trauma? What is their
Yes,
process of healing?
exactly.
And it's so significant to be able to just provide by example that permission.
Yeah, I really believe, no, I really know that we
Yeah,
all have our stories, our
yeah.
valuable stories, no more valuable or less valuable than anybody else's. But we have those stories, and what a blessing we can to be able to tell that story first to ourselves,
Yeah.
but then to decide at at a later time if we want to maybe make a book out of it. And
Mm,
if this book of my autobiography encourages other people, then I will have certainly met my task,
mm,
and I will have done enough.
mm.
Yeah, yeah.
So I hear the done enough. What would it mean to be enough? Like, what does that look like or smell
Wow.
like or taste like?
Yeah, that's kind of interesting. One of the people who wrote uh, 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 blurbs for the book,
Yeah,
Gabor Mate, we've become really
yeah.
good friends over the years.
Mm,
And he wrote about it, one man's journey from searing pain to joy, from self-hate to self-love. And it
mm,
was a gradual process. It
yeah.
took place not all at once. Much of it came through in relationships.
Mm,
Particularly, I was blessed by different friends and lovers that I've had over the years,
mm-hmm,
and how their kindness and their support has also made a big difference in me accepting myself by being accepted
mm,
fully by another to then also accept myself. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Mm, that's beautiful. And I want to really encourage everyone out there to go get, well, first of all, how many books do you have? 8, 9, 12, 15?
That dozen, I think,
Seven,
got that.
seven, yeah, I know. But each, to be reading Dr. Peter Levine's work, if you haven't already, it's brilliant. And to Peter, would you say to even start at the autobiography? And then is there like a way, like where would you start if you were starting to read your books? What book
The
would you
very
start with?
beginning.
The
Oh, which
very
book?
beginning.
Oh,
Yeah, which
okay. Well, I
book?
think the
Because
book that
the
was,
autobiography of trauma is the beginning.
yeah, that's right. The beginning, the end of the beginning, and the beginning of the
Yeah.
end. You know, the book that engaged most people originally, I wrote it in 1992. It didn't get published till 96. And I
Oh,
said at that time there was one book on trauma, Judith Herman's book.
yeah.
So it was revolutionary at the time.
Yeah.
And that's still an important book. I think it
Yeah.
really lays the foundation for what I later developed in my other books. By the way, people can go to my website, Somatic Experiencing, one word, somaticexperiencing.com, and there's a list of books and talks and other things that I've done, and also links to the organization nonprofit organization that's responsible for getting this work out into the world. And we link to their website also, which is traumahealing.org.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So anyhow, thank you for sharing.
Peter.
Let me sharing my story, you sharing some of your story, and yeah.
Thank you,
And
Peter, for for being such a blessing in this world. And I don't say that lightly, because I have had the privilege, as of you, of seeing many people who tell me the stories of how your work has changed their life, how your journey of aliveness has allowed them to be on their journey of aliveness. Yes. And so I really honor you and honor your autobiography, your sharing of that story of aliveness. It's so significant. And
that would be my deepest hope.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Peter. And thank you, all my gently used human friends, beings out there who are listening. And check out somaticexperiencing.com. We'll put it in the show notes. And all of Dr. Peter Levine's work, lectures, they're all out there for your journey of healing.
Oh, thanks, Scott.
You're welcome.
Be well. Be well.
Me too. Thank you for listening to the Gently Used Human podcast with Dr. Scott Lyons and friends. Visit gentlyused.com for fun extras, including submitting your questions for advice from a Midwestern mom. And don't forget to spill the tea and gossip about the show with all your friends and frenemies. And you know what? Show us some love by giving us 5 stars and leaving a review in your favorite apps. This helps us connect with all the other gently used humans out there. Oh, and by the way, you look fierce today.